What if I told you that after the Chinese Grand Prix the FIA discovered something about the Mercedes that no one expected to see so early in the season? Because what seemed like simply a dominant start from the Brackley team began to raise suspicions within the paddock. The telemetry data didn't add up, the car's power display was strange, and several teams began pointing directly to the W17. In a matter of hours, the FIA technical delegates entered the Mercedes garage to thoroughly inspect the car, analyzing telemetry, GPS, and even the behavior of the engine in search of something hidden. And the most surprising thing of all is that it wasn't just about Mercedes being fast, but about how it was using its energy on the track, something that could indicate that the team found a loophole in the regulations that no one else had detected. So the big question now is, what exactly could Mercedes have hidden in its car to surprise even the FIA itself after the Chinese GP? The Chinese Grand Prix was simply to be the second big test of the season, one more race in a calendar that was just beginning. After what was seen in Australia, many teams arrived in Shanghai with the expectation of better understanding the true competitive order of the grid. However, what happened from the first moment on the track left the entire paddock with a strange feeling. Not only was Mercedes competitive, it seemed to be playing in a completely different league. And when that happens in modern Formula One, where differences are often measured in thousands, uncomfortable questions immediately begin to arise. From the only training session of the sprint weekend, the W17 showed a pace that drew powerful attention. George Russell and young Kimi Antonelli managed to take the lead with an ease that no one expected. The most surprising thing was not only that Mercedes was leading, something that had already happened in other times, but the difference they managed to open compared to the rest of the grid. In representative conditions they managed to beat the second fastest car by more than half a second, a huge advantage by current Formula One standards. That kind of difference is usually only seen when a team finds something special in its car, or when it has discovered something that the others still don't understand. In the paddock, engineers from rival teams began to carefully analyze the available data. Nowadays, thanks to GPS and shared telemetry systems, it is possible to study the behavior of each car on the track with considerable precision. It was then that some analysts detected a peculiar pattern in the Mercedes. The car seemed to have extra oomph in very specific areas of the circuit, especially in the final Shanghai sector. While other cars lost acceleration when exiting corners or were slow to regain speed, the Mercedes showed a surprising ability to launch the car onto the straight with a power that did not seem entirely normal. At first, many thought that it was simply an aerodynamic advantage or better tuning of the car. But the more the data was analyzed, the more difficult it became to explain that performance with aerodynamics or optimized downforce alone. Suspicion began to turn towards another much more sensitive element within the new regulation, the management of the electrical energy of the hybrid system. In modern Formula One, the deployment of the ERS is strictly limited and controlled by the FIA. Each team must respect maximum amounts of energy that they can release at certain times of the round. If a car seems to have more energy available than the rest at certain points, the first question that arises is inevitable. How are they doing it? As the weekend progressed, rumors began to spread around the paddock. Some engineers from rival teams suggested that Mercedes might have found a loophole in the regulations related to the car's energy management. Not necessarily something illegal at first glance, but a very aggressive interpretation of the rules that would allow them to release more electrical power right at the most critical moments of the lap. If that was true, it would perfectly explain why the W17 seemed to fire so hard in certain areas of the circuit. And in a championship where every tenth counts, an advantage like this could be absolutely decisive. It didn't take long for suspicions to reach the ears of the FIA. The Federation had already been closely observing Mercedes' performance since the start of the season, but what was happening in China increased its surveillance even more. Some teams began sending technical queries and comments to FIA delegates, asking that the Mercedes on-track behavior be reviewed in greater detail. In Formula One, this is relatively common when a team seems to have too big an advantage. But in this case, the concern was especially serious because the possible trick would be related to the very heart of the technical regulation, the hybrid energy system. It was after the sprint classification when the situation took an even more striking turn. The technical delegates decided to carry out an additional inspection of George Russell's car. It was not a routine review like those done at the end of each session. This time the analysis was much deeper. The FIA reviewed the car's complete telemetry, compared GPS data to study exactly where and how power was released, and even analyzed acoustic information from the engine in order to detect possible irregularities in power delivery. It was a meticulous process that sought to answer a single question. Was Mercedes using some type of system or strategy that exceeded the limits allowed by the regulations? While all this was happening, the atmosphere inside the paddock became increasingly tense. The visible presence of the technical delegates in the Mercedes garage did not go unnoticed by anyone. Journalists, engineers, and members of other teams began to carefully observe every movement. It was even revealed that Toto Wolff had direct talks with senior FIA officials shortly after the session, something that naturally fueled further speculation. When a team dominates so strongly and at the same time is subject to such detailed technical inspections, it is inevitable that the rest of the championship begins to wonder if there is something more behind that performance than simple brilliant engineering. And so, what had started as a normal racing weekend ended up becoming the beginning of one of the most intriguing stories of the championship. Mercedes was still leading on the track, but now the focus was no longer solely on its speed. The big question floating in the air was a much more disturbing one. Had Mercedes found a way to exploit the energy regulations without anyone detecting it? Until now, as the Chinese Grand Prix weekend progressed, the doubts around Mercedes stopped being simple paddock comments and became a real concern within the championship. As several engineers began to closely compare the available telemetry data, a pattern emerged that was extremely difficult to ignore. The Mercedes not only accelerated better than the other cars, but it did so at very specific moments of the lap, especially in the last sector of the Shanghai circuit. Where most single-seaters seemed to run out of electric thrust, the W17 still had a power reserve that allowed it to gain meters with ease. To analysts on other teams, this didn't seem like a simple matter of aerodynamics or traction. Everything pointed to something much more delicate: the way Mercedes was managing its hybrid power. The new technical regulation places enormous emphasis on the hybrid energy system. Each power unit is limited in the amount of electrical energy it can deploy during a lap, and those limits are constantly monitored by the FIA. However, as is often the case in Formula One, the rules leave little room for interpretation. These gray areas of the regulation are precisely where the most creative engineers try to find competitive advantages. And that is what many began to suspect that Mercedes had achieved. Not necessarily an illegal system, but an extremely sophisticated way of managing and releasing ERS energy at specific times, thus achieving an advantage in acceleration without apparently exceeding the established limits. The theory that began to circulate in the paddock spoke of a possible manipulation in the car's energy deployment strategy. In other words, the Mercedes could be redistributing its electrical energy in a way that the other teams had not yet discovered. Instead of using ERS evenly throughout the lap, the W17 system seemed to concentrate a greater amount of power in key areas of the circuit, especially at the exit of corners that precede long straights. That type of optimization can make a huge difference because it allows you to gain speed at the exact moment where the car begins to accelerate and, therefore, maintain an advantage throughout the entire backstraight. To understand why this was so suspicious, we must remember how the hybrid system works in a Formula One car. Electrical energy is recovered mainly in two moments: during braking and through the heat generated by the engine. That energy is stored in a battery and then released to assist the combustion engine. But the regulation sets very clear limits on how much energy can be deployed and under what conditions. If Mercedes had found a way to release more power without the system registering in excess of those limits, we would be talking about an extremely intelligent solution, and potentially very controversial. The FIA then decided to go even deeper into its analysis. The technical delegates began to review not only the basic data of the car, but also much more complex aspects related to the software that controls the power unit. In modern Formula One, much of the hybrid system's performance depends on extremely sophisticated programs that manage energy recovery and deployment. A small adjustment to that software can completely change the way the car uses its electrical power during a lap. For this reason, one of the hypotheses that began to circulate was that Mercedes could have developed an algorithm capable of optimizing the use of the ERS in a way that the regulations had not foreseen. In addition to telemetry and software, the FIA also looked at other elements that typically don't receive as much public attention. Among them was even the acoustic analysis of the engine, a technique that allows irregularities in the behavior of the power unit to be detected from the sound it produces. These types of tools are used when there is suspicion that a team could be using indirect methods to exceed established power limits. In other words, the technical delegates were trying to check whether the Mercedes generated more electrical energy than the regulations allowed, even though the official sensors did not show it obviously. And that uncertainty was precisely what kept the entire paddock in suspense. No one yet knew if Mercedes had simply discovered engineering genius or if it was using a trick that would end up being banned. The only thing that was clear was that the performance of the W17 had caught everyone's attention, even the FIA itself. And when the federation begins to investigate a car in such detail in the middle of the championship race, it usually means that something very important could be hidden under the bodywork. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.